Okay, welcome back. This is Chapter 9. Chapter 9 is about methods, page 223. So what the heck is a method? Now, if you've had other programming languages, they go by different names. Sometimes they're called functions, sometimes they're called subroutines. A method is a good term that you can use to describe all those. So a method is probably the better of the three I just mentioned. So remember we talked about functional decomposition, where you take a big problem, whatever the problem is, and you break it up into small chunks. Well, one of the reasons why you want to break it up is so you don't have any code duplication. So for example, if I'm going to be, I don't know, doing some math operation, I mean, I could do the math operation, 5 times and just copy the code 5 times. But that's not smart. It takes up too much room. Plus, it's just not good programming hygiene to do it that way. So we're going to use methods in order to extract out things, reusable components that we can use over and over and over. That's the point of a method, is to pull out something that you can use over again. Maybe over and over again in your own application, or maybe pull it out to the point and make it so generic that it can be used in any other application later on, where you just go grab it once and plop it into your application and then you're good to go. Okay, so parts of a method on page 224. So they start off with an example here about this hypothetical method called add contact. And so it's got some parts. Let's just go through it nice and slow and easy like. Okay, the first part is public. That's an access modifier. Right now we have public and private. Later on we'll be adding one more, but right now all we have is public and private. You've seen that. The next one is a return type. So in the Java language, all methods have a return type, to include methods that don't return anything. Now let that sink in a minute. Yes, all methods return something, to include those that don't return anything. Yes, okay. If it doesn't return anything, instead of the word boolean or int or double or whatever it is that it's supposed to be returning, it would return a thing called void. And void is a special character, a special sequence that basically tells the machine this thing doesn't return anything, but it still has to be there in the list, in this declaration. Okay, then you have the method name, which in this case is add contact. And then the parentheses, and then 2 parameters. Now, the parameters have a pair. The first part is the data type, like Boolean or string. And then the second type would be the name of that thing. Now, this is weird. The name of the variable here is a completely new variable. It doesn't have to exist anywhere before. It doesn't have to be the same variable as you use in the body of your application. So Boolean, which is a data type, and then isFriend is a completely new variable. Okay, it's like just as if we had gone up like someplace over here and declared that variable, except we're declaring it essentially inside this method header. Okay, so I'm declaring a variable inside a method header, and it's called a parameter. If there's more than one parameter, they're separated by commas. Okay? And then after that, we have curly braces. Okay, pretty straightforward. So if I was going to use this thing, I'm going to pop on over to my, not that one, this one. Okay, so look, I've done this so many times now, I'm not even going to bother to show you how I did it. But I start a new application, I swap out my activity main to something. I went ahead and put an edit text in there, the whole shebang. Okay, cool. So assume all that. So over here, I'm going to create me this goofy thing, whatever it is. So here we go. I'm going to say public boolean, and then add contact, and it's going to take as a boolean. isFriend, helps if you spell boolean, and then string, let's do first name. Okay, and then we're going to have curly braces. Okay, one of the things that I do every single time I do a method is as soon as I get the curly braces going, you can already see it has a red squiggly basically saying, hey, you told me that it returns a Boolean, and yet you haven't returned anything yet. So one of the things that I do is I go ahead and create a variable. I always call it answer. That's just me. You don't have to do that. And so I go in here and say whatever, like false. And then I make it return whatever the answer is. Okay, now obviously in real life there'd be a heck of a lot of stuff in here, right? At this part between declaring the variable and returning, there's obviously going to be something in there. But since we're just demonstrating that, I'm not gonna populate this thing. So now, in order to use a method, so this is how you create a method. Did you notice that I created it inside the class, but not inside another method? Typically, you don't create methods inside methods. Okay, so this is a method. And it has a void return type. This is a method called add contact. Now, if in here I want to call add contact, I don't need to put the public. I don't need to put the return type. I just need to be able to say add contact. And then I go in here and I put my stuff. Now, I could just put literals in here. So I'm going to put literal. I'm going to say false. And then Bob. Okay, so in this particular scenario, I didn't have to have public, didn't have to have Boolean, didn't have to have the data type, because all that is in the method header. But when you use the method, you don't need any of that. Now I'm going to use that thing again, except this time I'm going to be a little bit more sophisticated. I'm going to call bool. If I could spell, I'd be okay. Boolean, I don't know. How about enemy? Is equal to true. Let's do false. That's not making any sense. Hang on a second. My friend is equal to false. And then I'm going to do a string, and I'm going to call mine name is equal to Bob. And then I'm going to call that guy a second time. Actually, I'm going to do more than that. I'm going to say Boolean result is equal to add contact my friend, comma, name. Okay, so in this particular case, instead of using string literals and Boolean literals, I'm using variable names. And notice that the variable name here does not have to match the variable name here. And the variable name, is friend versus my friend and name versus first name. None of that matters, right? In other words, the variable names don't have to match because these are brand new variables. Okay? That kind of sort of making sense? Good. In this particular case, I'm completely ignoring the return type. And I did not get an error message. So is it perfectly okay to have something that returns a value and you just completely ignore it? Is that okay? Is that no alarm bells went off, no error message, not even a warning? So yeah, that's perfectly okay for you to just say, it's perfectly okay. I don't care what the return type, if it worked or not, I don't care. Now, I'm not sure how relevant that is in the real world, but nevertheless. Okay, now on page 226, there's a bug in the book where the author says that the return type is part of the method signature, and it's not. The method signature, and we're going to be talking about signatures a lot, so pay attention. The signature is made up of just this part right here, okay? Not this. It does not include this thing, so the author was wrong when he put that statement in there. A method signature is made up of the name, in this case, add contact, plus then the parameters, but not just parameters. It's the number, the type, and the order. Number, type, and order of the parameters. Okay? So that's what makes up a signature. The number, in this case 2, the types, Boolean and string, and then the order, which means Boolean comes first and the string comes second. That's what the order means, right? Okay, cool. On page 226, they talk about the modifier, the access modifier being public and private, and we have protected up here, but I'm going to ignore protected. Yes, we've used it in some examples, but for the most part, I'm just going to ignore that until we get to that part. And so 227, they start talking about the return type one more time. So what does this method return? Well, this method doesn't return anything. That's why it has void. And this one returns a Boolean. Okay, cool. Now, it could be any type, right? I can create a method out here that does anything. I mean, I can go here, for example, and say public integer. And I'm going to call mine add1. And then I'm going to take an integer. I don't know what we're going to call this thing. I don't know. Value. In this case, I don't know what the thing is. It's kind of hard to come up with a descriptive name for the variable. So I would say answer is equal to value plus 1. Oh, helps if you give it a data type. And then I'm going to return that thing. Okay, I could have done that all on one line. In fact, just for the heck of it, I'm going to do control slash, and we're going to do this all on one line. Return value plus 1. Okay, you see how those are equivalent? Okay, good. Now, if I go here and I say, hey, I want to see if this thing worked. Okay, so I'm going to say int, I don't know, demo is equal to add1 12. And then I want to see what it did, right? Makes sense? So I'm going to do et display set text demo and see what happens. So I'm going to run mine just to see if it worked. Oh, it's taking a little longer than usual for some weird reason. Okay, finally. Okay, so it came up and demo is equal to 13. Hooray! So it did what it was supposed to do. Kind of sort of makes sense. So it can be any type of data. So in my particular case, I made this guy return an integer. It could be a double. It could be an array. It could be an employee class. Right? Anything. It could be a class. It could be a primitive. It could be anything. Okay, good. All right. So what are the rules for naming a method? Ooh, I like rules, so you might want to be paying attention. So on page 229, to start talking about this, the one is I'm using camel case. So it's, add contact is 2 words, and I stick them together with the C in the middle. Add 1, I'm taking add and the word 1, sticking them together with the capital O in the middle. Okay, cool, makes sense. They should have some sort of verb or action word somehow. For example, later on we're going to be doing something called, calculate pay. It ought to say something. I want the method name to give you a hint of what it is it does for a living. You don't want to have a method that says, kumquat. And you go, okay, I'll use it, but I have no idea what the heck that thing does. So pick names that make sense and are action verbs, okay? Don't say bread or chair or book. It's read book or slice bread or sit in chair, right? So kind of an action in there somewhere. And then avoid using the word get or set, because later on we're going to be using gets and sets in a different scenario, so I don't want you to confuse it. So every normal method should not start with get or set. Okay, we're coming up on the 15-minute mark. You guys know how this works.